Okay, so the function of this video assumes that you are overwhelmed, right, and traumatized and sitting on mountains of evidence, right? So I'm going to teach you how to transform that chaos into a structured legal narrative, alright? So, if you've built your timeline, this video is how to turn your timeline into a case brief for your fraud complaint, because for the sake of the federal judge who has no knowledge of what's going on, we are going to create a small case brief, alright? And all these preparations that I'm making, by the way, in these videos are so that you can not only write the complaint properly, have it properly organized in your head, reduce the trauma so that you can actually speak properly, but to be able to give you the ability to legally argue it in court, okay? So anyway, so how to turn your timeline into a case brief for your fraud complaint. Why the timeline matters. If you've built your timeline, the first one that's a narrative, the second one that's the outline, and then the third one that I just referenced in the last video, you've already done the hardest part, okay? You've taken years of trauma, coercive control, and legal abuse, and you've laid it all out in chronological order, alright? Now we're going to take that timeline, the last one we just created, that was with our material evidence and core material facts, right? And we're going to turn it into a case brief, which is a clean, structured summary of what happened, who did it, when it happened, how it violated the law, and how it connects to the fraud on the court. It is basically the full story, including the backstory, that the federal judge is going to need to be able to understand your fraud complaint. So it's a critically important thing, and like I said, we're going to insert that case brief into your fraud complaint. So this case brief is what becomes the absolute spine of your federal complaint, alright? Step one, you identify the anchor events in your timeline. Your timeline is long. We just identified the anchor events with the core material evidence in the last video. It's full of hearings, filings, CPS visits, evaluations, and emergencies, but your case brief starts with anchor events, the moments that the fraud actually took place, okay? The judge is not going to want to hear all the details. They're going to hear only the fraud in order, how it played out, and how it affected you, okay? So, anchor events are the points where the officer of the court made false statements, material facts against you were concealed or in favor of you were concealed, fraudulent documents were submitted, okay? False allegations were used to influence the judge, or different law violations, like as in your okay, so in the case of ADA 2010 rights, where Title II compliance was not there, civil and constitutional rights, federal laws that were not observed. So, an officer of the court has to be responsible for the fraud. So you look for the events where the judge was misled, or the court process itself, if it was the judge that was part of the fraud, was misled by someone with legal authority. Examples of anchor events are like the day the attorney submitted the falsified drug test, the hearings where the GAL lied about CPS findings, the moment CPS concealed a safety report, or evaluations where the psychologists gave you a good assessment, or when they were paid by CPS and gave you false reports, okay? So all that stuff, those anchor events will become the headings in your case brief, all right? What is the core material fact here? Your document says you look for the facts that were false, that were intentional, that were presented to the judge, and change the outcome of your case, all right? Again, with the examples. Drug test was negative, but the attorney told the judge it was positive, okay? So when you structure the language in your case brief, it sounds like that. The drug test was negative, but the attorney, the opposing counsel, the district attorney, whoever it was, CPS attorney, the CPS worker, okay, told the judge that it was positive, and then you were not given an opportunity to correct that on your own behalf in court. Like, so that's a good example. CPS documented no abuse, aka I have like 10 unsubstantiated reports, but the GAL told the judge that the child disclosed abuse. So if you can prove that there were unsubstantiated reports against you that say there were no findings of abuse, right, by their investigation, the CPS investigation, but the GAL lies and says that your child told them that they were abused, that's part of your example. The psychological evaluation showed stability, but the evaluator wrote that you were unstable, okay? Those are your core material facts. Each anchor event has one core material fact at its center, all right? So, you're going to build a mini narrative around each core material fact. Now you take each core material fact and you build the narrative around it. It has 5 parts. This paragraph that I'm asking you to write, okay? The date when it happened, the officer of the court who committed the fraud, what lie or concealment occurred, the contradictory evidence that you have to prove what the truth actually was, and the outcome, aka how it changed the judge's decision or the finding against you, TPR removal, blah, blah, blah. Okay, for example, on March 14th, 2022, CPS attorney told the judge that the child disclosed abuse. But there's contradictory evidence, including CPS reports from March 10th that shows no disclosure, the child feels safe. And the outcome of that was that the judge suspended my visitation. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. This becomes one section in your case brief, one paragraph. Step 4, connect each mini narrative to the timeline. Now you go to the back to your timeline and you pull the surrounding events. What happened before the fraud, what happened during the fraud, what happened after the fraud. Okay, so you create your case brief by showing the judge the flow of harm, the chronological flow of harm, and that is a complete, the way I just gave you is a complete way to show the judge what you're trying to say. So, for example, to connect each mini narrative to the timeline, or each paragraph to the timeline, here's a good example. Let's say, and this is just an example obviously, but let's say March 10th, CPS interviews the child with no disclosure. March 14th, the CPS attorney lies in court. March 14th, the judge suspended my visitation. And March 20th, because the judge suspended my visitation due to the CPS attorney lying in court, my child began to show signs of distress, okay? April 2nd, school reports, there is a behavioral decline of my child. That's how you would structure this particular narrative. Okay, so take each of those things that I just mentioned and turn it into a case brief section. And here's how you do it. Each section has a heading. So for example, false drug test submitted by attorney, March 2021. All right, that would be your heading. The statement of the core material fact, which is one sentence. The timeline summary that we just created. The evidence summary, saying what you have to prove, what documents you have to prove the truth. The legal impact, how it changed the outcome, why it is fraud on the court. So once you build this case brief, you can show why it is fraud on the court. You have to tie it back to the doctrine. Because this officer of the court intentionally withheld material evidence, you know, of my innocence, right? Here's the material evidence that they did that. It changed the entire outcome of what happened because they committed the fraud, right? And here's the clear and convincing evidence. All right. So this structure, the way that I just set it out, makes your case brief clean, readable, and legally powerful because it shows the judge the chronology just based on only the core evidence, the core material evidence and core material facts that we isolated earlier. Okay. Now, assemble all the little separate sections that you just did into one coherent case brief. So, once you have 3 to 7 sections, you assemble them into a single document, okay? And your case brief will look like this. Introduction. What the case is about, what the harm was, what the fraud did. Section 2, the timeline overview, a short summary of the major events, the core anchor events, okay? The core material facts. Each section has one fraud event, all right? The next section, section 4, is the pattern of misconduct. So where we show the repeated deception, concealment, or manipulation of the case. Section 5, legal standards. Explain the fraud on the court using your document's language, meaning however it happened, explain how the fraud worked, okay? Then, Section 6 is the conclusion. Summarize the fraud and the harm that came as a result of the fraud. This case brief becomes the narrative backbone of your federal complaint. Step 7. Why this matters. When you file your federal fraud on the court complaint, the judge will not read, and I've said this, but I'm going to say it again, all your evidence, all your transcripts, all your CPS records, all your emails, all your medical files. They will read your case brief. Okay? What they're going to be willing to read is your case brief. And I just outlined for you how to actually write your case brief. Your case brief tells the judge what happened, who did it, how they violated the law, how it harmed you, and why it qualifies for fraud on the court. Your evidence will be attached later as exhibits, okay? But your case brief is the story that the judge follows. Closing. You're building the blueprint of your case, okay? So, we're getting somewhere. Your timeline was the map. Your case brief is the blueprint of your case. We have to provide all of these little steps so that the federal judge can look at your case cohesively, coherently, and understand exactly what happened. Your fraud complaint will be the structure built on top of all these things. You are not just organizing paper, okay? You are reclaiming your voice. You are documenting the truth that the court ignored. You are building a case that exposes the fraud that harmed you. And this is how you begin. I need everybody to understand that I appreciate your time. If you have any questions, as I've said before, put it in the comments underneath the video, put it in the comments in the group in Facebook, or message Adam and I, and we will get back to you as soon as possible to answer your questions to the best of our ability. This case brief information, I'm going to actually take the script that I wrote and I'm going to upload it into the files probably tomorrow. That way everybody has access to what I just said, in case you didn't, weren't able to take notes, etc. But anyway, I hope everybody has a really good day, and I will talk to you soon.